So today I'm going to do another demonstration of gilding. This is oil gilding with imitation gold. The last one I did was just touching up the base of a large arch. But this one, today we're going to do some more decorative surfaces, and that requires a little more technique. So basically I support the leaf on a board. I use loose leaf, and we get that at 10,000 sheets at a time. And I've prepared the frame through all the various stages. There's something like 13 stages from start to finish, and basically it's sticky with a gold size varnish, so that's why it's called oil gilding. And this leaf I'm using is imitation gold, which is known as slag metal or Dutch metal. Some people, I've heard them refer to it as French gilding, but the French don't use imitation gold. So what I'm doing is supporting it and just allowing the leading edge to touch the surface where it will stick, and I'm holding it up and off the surface so that it only makes contact with the high sections, and there's a little bit of sort of overlap. I'm tapping it and raising it so that it doesn't, or it gives it a little bit of extra leaf to be pushed down into the hollows. Now it will split in the hollows because it's only making contact with the highlights. So when we pat it in, then where the splits appear in the hollow, we lay a second sort of sheet over it, and it will stick to where the oil comes through the splits, and that'll fill the gaps, fill the splits, and give us one even surface at the end. So again, I'm laying it overlapping. I work from left to right, and I overlap the leaf in a sort of roof tile type fashion, and you'll see why when I come to pat it down and wipe off the surplus. You've got to work really kind of methodically, and in the sense that if you go in a different direction, or if you're end up with a split like that where I didn't overlap it, it could show up as a join. And we don't really want that in sort of good gilding. You're just left with one even surface of lustrous metal, whether it be gold or silver, brass, aluminium. They're all different types of leaf. So now I'm just going to pat it down with a cloth, and then we'll start to see it sort of splitting in the hollows, particularly when you're doing something as decorative as this, where it's nothing but sort of highlights and not just a smooth surface. But having said that, in a way it's actually easier to do a decorative surface because you can hide all the joins and splits. They get hidden in the hollows. Later when it gets toned, the toner goes into the hollows and hides these splits if you don't manage to fill them. And it could be that either the oil is too dry, or I've missed it with the brush when I was putting the gold size on. Or it could be a combination of things, like I didn't seal the surface enough with shellac, therefore the oil soaked in and dried out. So if the oil's too dry, obviously the leaf won't stick. And if it's too wet, it just gives you a horrible, bloody, paint type surface that doesn't look like gilding at all. If you followed sort of the manufacturer's recommendations and gilded on 12-hour oil at 12 hours, it would just be horrible. I tend to leave it till 20 hours, depending on the weather. In summer it might dry out a bit quicker, but in winter it slows up considerably. So you've just got to work with the timing and the seasons, and have a bit of a gut feel for it and a lot of practice. I've been doing this since I think around 1970. It could have been 68, I've kind of lost track. I started with Crawford Berman and Company, which was the fifth descendant of the oldest picture framing company in Australia, and they made hand-crafted ornamental picture frames for all of the artists. The original owners made frames for all the Heidelberg School artists when they were starting out in Melbourne. Crawford Berman and Company was the descendant of John Thallon and Company, and so he was the first here. He was a woodcarver, gilder and ornamentalist, and did plasterwork for ceilings for some of the more famous buildings within Melbourne and Australia. I've still got some of John Thallon's old books and equipment that later owners of the business were going to throw out. So they're pieces of Australian history that need to be preserved. So what I've done here is just sort of laid it, and where there's obvious splits, I've filled it with a second sort of layer. I'm just, where there's really obvious pieces missing, I'm padding in a second layer to fill those splits, fill those gaps. And I pat it down as much as I can with a cloth, and then when the majority of that is all filled, well, then we can fill it with a brush as well, and we can force the leaf right into the hollows. And that's called skewing the gold, because once you press it in, you kind of stir it around a little bit, and it'll mix, just sort of grab hold into the oil. So I'm using just a cotton cloth and a fairly standard type paintbrush for this purpose. Seeing some big splits here. So once it's all patted down, then you can wipe off some of the surplus, and you need to do that. You can't just leave it like that. But having said that, you can't clean it all off. We do the final clean after another 24 hours when the oil underneath is totally dry. So I'm just patting it as best I can, or as much as I can. And then, because we've overlapped it from left to right, when we wipe it off, we just go the opposite direction. So we're not tearing those joins back off each other. So if you lay it this way, you wipe it that way. And that way, you never tear it. If I wiped it that way, I'd be tearing the sheet off, and I'd be left with red lines. Or red, or whatever the base colour is. With gold, we usually use red under it, and with silver, we use black. It's quite traditional. It goes back many centuries. The Europeans or the French used red. The Italians used yellow ochre, and the English used black as a base. And because the original gold is so thin, the base colour affects how it looks. It changes the colour effectively. I've come to find that black doesn't look that good under gold, and red certainly looks terrible under silver. So now, normally I wouldn't start doing this until I've gone right around the frame, because we don't want loose bits sticking to the oil. We'd rather have big, full-on sheets. But just to give you, so I don't drag this out, for too many hours, I'm just going to show you here now a section that I'm filling with the brush. And once that's filled and all these little hollow pieces of ornament are covered in leaf as well, I give it a bit of a light brush just to see that it's all covered. And then I leave the frame for at least a day. Each stage you do on a frame should be left a day. So you shellac it, leave it a day, oil it, leave it overnight, gild it, leave it another day, just so that all the various surfaces and coatings can harden and dry in their own right. As I say, in winter it slows up considerably. So Once I've done this sort of filling, that's pretty much left like that now for at least a day, and then when this frame is all gilded and ready to clean up, well then I'll make another little YouTube video to show what we do, because effectively once this is dry and cleaned off, then I'll seal it with shellac, and that stops any tarnishing. Then I put a coating of like a toner over it so that we get some contrast. It makes it darker in the hollows, it makes it duller in sections, and then we polish the highlights so we give it some contrast and some life. And your eye follows the highlights around the frame and is drawn to the thing as a whole. It also, if you leave a frame bright gold like this, you actually lose the ornamentation. But by giving it some contrast and some darkness around in the hollows, well then it brings the highlights out and makes it more lustrous and more effective. And particularly if you're working on paintings, painting frames rather than mirror frames, you would then not just use a dark toner, but you might use a wash, which will be complementary to the overall colour of the painting. But these are all just little intricacies that everything you work on is a little bit different. This is just mirror frames will make a little bit brighter, and for other items we use real gold, or a combination of real gold highlights onto Dutch metal sort of base, or we just do completely water gilded 23 carat or 24 carat these days, and burnished water gilding. So that's a whole different ball game, far more intricate, but the technique goes back to 3000 BC, and it's what was done in the tomb of Tutankhamun, and we still pretty much use those same techniques today. And obviously the gold is the same in carat, and even back then in 3000 BC they've done tests on the gold in the tomb of Tutankhamun, and it is perfectly 1/300,000th of an inch thick, beaten by hand and then laid onto the Armenian bowl, which is a clay base. That clay base is moistened, and then the gold sticks to that, and when that's dry it's burnished with an agate stone, which compacts the clay, and with it compacts the gold, which makes it more lustrous and bright. So that's for another day. I'll show you how to do that, but I hope this gives you some enjoyment, and look forward to showing you some more, and hopefully in the next week, probably next week, I'll make one showing how this goes to the next stage, and then how it looks when it's totally finished. So thanks for today, and I'll turn off now.